Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar in our series, COVID-19 in Context, News Coverage and News Literacy in Uncertain Times. I'm Sunshine Menezes, the Executive Director of the University of Rhode Island's Metcalf Institute. Today, we'll be discussing digital forensics, or how to fact check like a pro. We're bringing you these webinars in partnership with the News Literacy Project, a nonpartisan national education nonprofit that provides educators with the tools and resources to teach their students how to navigate today's complex information landscape, as well as to learn to judge the credibility of information for themselves and become engaged and informed participants in our democracy. Metcalf Institute's mission is to engage diverse audiences in conversations about science and the environment through webinars like this and by providing education, training, and resources for journalists, scientists, and other science communicators. On behalf of Metcalf Institute, I'd like to thank the Ruth and Hal Launders Charitable Trust for supporting this series. We've all experienced the unprecedented challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, from our personal health, both physical and mental, to our social networks and society at large. This disease is testing our governance, public health, and economic systems, among others. As we all try to come to terms with and make sense of the daunting scientific uncertainties about the virus, we're also facing one of the most urgent science communication challenges of our time. This four-part webinar series brings together journalists, news literacy education experts, and scientists to explore these science communication challenges. Each of the webinars will be posted on Metcalf Institute's YouTube channel, and we'll share that link in the chat. After today, we'll have one final webinar in the series on May 5th. That will be about how to make sense of scientific uncertainty. You can also see the link in the chat to register for that last program. Building on the 10 critical news literacy skills discussed in Tuesday's webinar, we will introduce you today to some of the tactics commonly used to spread misinformation. We'll also show how to use free online tools to debunk false content like a pro. Leading us through this discussion is Peter Ádámz, Senior Vice President of Education at the News Literacy Project. Peter began his career as a classroom teacher in the New York City schools through Teach for America. He is also taught in the Chicago public school system at Roosevelt University and at Chicago City College's Wilbur Wright campus. He also worked with the New York City Teaching Fellows Program and with After School Matters as an independent education consultant. Since joining the News Literacy Project in 2009, Peter has coordinated classroom and after-school programs, served as the Chicago program manager, worked on organizational strategy, developed the News Literacy Project's digital program, and led news literacy training and workshops for educators and others. He was promoted to his current position in January 2014 and now oversees the News Literacy Project's education team, which develops resources and training for teachers. He and the other team members are all based in Chicago. And with that, I am happy to turn this over to Peter so he can tell us more.
Great. Thank you, Sunshine. It's great to be with all of you. I think you got a pretty concise overview of what the session today will be about, and a little bit about NLP. If you want to learn more about who we are and our mission to see news literacy really integrated and embedded in the American education experience, you can visit our website at newslit.org. We have resources there for you as well. We also have a weekly email newsletter called The Sift. There are 3 issues left in this school year. It runs during the school year, and we will be back in September. But if you want to check out our archives or subscribe to that newsletter, it is there as well. So I'm going to dive right into some examples of misinformation. I've tried to organize this session around misinformation about the pandemic and about COVID-19. Some of you have probably heard that on February 2nd, the WHO declared the novel coronavirus pandemic an infodemic as well. So there is a massive infodemic that is running in parallel with the actual physical pandemic. And they define that as an overabundance of information, some accurate and some not, that makes it hard for people to find trustworthy sources and reliable guidance. And here are some examples of the inaccurate information that's circulating early on in the pandemic. This has calmed down a bit, but we're still seeing it. There are a lot of cures, false preventative, false cures, false preventative measures like gargling with salt water, vinegar water, lemon, ginger, all these sorts of home remedies to sort of wash the virus out of your throat before it can infect your lungs. This is entirely false. And it gets repeated and iterated in different kinds of text-based rumors. So these text-based rumors sharing some of the same alleged but false cures or prevention measures were circulating pretty broadly early on in the pandemic, largely because I think people were trying to share what they thought was helpful information, but in fact, this could be quite dangerous. And people actually, try this. So one big lesson, I think, is to remember that as easy as social media platforms make it for us to like and share content, it does have an impact, right? If you share something that's not true, it can make its way to someone like this who actually tried the quote self-diagnose test that I had up here a minute ago. There was a rumor that if you could take a deep breath and hold it for more than 10 seconds, it means you don't have the virus, and that's not true. So that could lead people to believe they are not contagious when they are, if they are, and so that could be very, very dangerous. Other text-based rumors have circulated just last week or 10 days ago. This rumor that Trump said, quote, hundreds of governors are calling him. And of course, we have 50 plus some governors in territories. But this is false. So Trump did not say that. Here's, in fact, what fact checkers think he said that was the basis for this rumor.
It's too bad, but we could have given, you saw the statements. We have hundreds of statements, including from Democrats and Democrat governors. And if you look,
so
they were all saying, we need ventilators, we need, you don't hear
from Democratic governors or Democrat governors. So this circulated pretty broadly. You can see this one was shared 179 times, but that rumor made its jump from Facebook, where that original instance I screenshotted it came from, over to Twitter. And one remarkable thing you'll notice is that most of these are actually copies of the exact same text. So you can see hundreds in all caps. You can see the double period after him, quote, period, in multiple instances of this across the web. So if you just search that phrase, you can see that people have just copied and pasted the text over and over and over again. And that is not necessarily evidence of automated or computational coordination. It may be, but it also could just be hyper-partisans sharing a message and copying it and broadcasting it through partisan groups or other means. Another rumor that circulated, obviously, there have been a lot of conspiracy theories about the pandemic. One of them early on was that hospitals were not as busy as they said they were in New York, and that they were using mannequins to stage a pandemic. So this is a variation on a false flag conspiracy theory. Of course, this is entirely false. This is a picture from the Defense Visual Information Distribution Service. So you can see here the picture of military medical personnel wheeling a mannequin on a gurney. What they are practicing for the USNS Comfort, the medical ship that pulled in at New York. They were practicing transferring patients. They're practicing protocols. The use of medical mannequins is actually very common. And so pictures of medical mannequins were going viral as, quote, evidence, but false evidence that the pandemic's being staged. This actually just circulated recently. This was yesterday, posted yesterday to Twitter. You can see it's gotten 4,500 retweets, 4,100 likes, and purporting to be London on lockdown, preparing for, anti-5G protesters. This isn't London at all. That's in Malaysia, in a city called Seliang Baru that's actually going into portion of that city is going into physical lockdown because they've had an outbreak that they're trying to contain. The recent Reopen America or anti-quarantine protests have also prompted a lot of misinformation. Signs are very easy to Photoshop. So you can see here a tweet with a protester holding a sign that looks like it has a crazy conspiracy theory. So, you know, Barack has 6 letters, Hussein has 7 letters, Obama has 5, that adds up to 19, COVID-19, open your eyes, right? This is almost certainly was created as satire, but it began to circulate with, you know, as an authentic image. People believed it and they thought this was an actual protester sign, but it's not, it's a fake, it's a doctored sign. As many of you know, signs or pieces of paper are incredibly easy to doctor. So here's the original. She was actually holding a sign that said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And this was in Huntington Beach, California at a recent protest there. Here are some more signs. These were actually shared and used as the lead image on a verified account and a lead image on a story on their website. The signs did not say, you know, protect my right to die, defund science, hands off my ignorance, my virus, my choice. They actually said, you know, fear is the real virus. This cure is deadlier than COVID, reopen Colorado now. So these were folks outside of the Colorado State Capitol building in Denver on April 19th. This was taken by a Getty photographer named Jason Connolly. But those signs again were doctored. And again, likely in a satirical fashion by whoever did it, but once it started circulating, it was mistaken for authentic signs and used in a partisan manner. And you know, people engage in something called confirmation bias. So if they see something that resonates with their biases, if they think that they're against these protests, if they think they're misguided, they might lean into that and not really scrutinize it. So we have to really stay on our guard and be aware of our own biases and the way we're responding to information that we're seeing. This image that I have here, a man holding a swastika flag with the name Trump above and Pence below, circulated on Reddit as taking place in Lansing, Michigan. Lansing had one of the first, I think maybe the first, anti-quarantine protests. I believe it was on April 15th. And the implication here is that this person is an anti-quarantine protester. And in fact, there were some controversial and offensive signs at that protest. This is an authentic picture from the Lansing protest with a woman holding a sign that's comparing Governor Whitmer of Michigan to Hitler or to the Nazi regime. But this particular image is out of context. This was actually from a March 2nd Bernie Sanders rally in Boise, Idaho.
So when you tell them if that's, oh my God!
Spare the volume here. So
what
there's a raw cell phone video on YouTube from that date, posted on March 2nd. It might be the day after the march, there at the end of April, beginning of March, in Boise, in support of Sanders. This is before, obviously, that he dropped out of the race. The gentleman holding the sign later in that video comes up and tells an anti-Trump joke. Rather distasteful one to the woman who's filming the Bernie supporters. She is there in counter protest and has a conversation with him. So it's clear that he is in fact not a Trump supporter. He was a Bernie supporter or a Trump critic and was holding up that sign in that spirit to send that message. There are some interesting parallels between a physical pandemic and what we're seeing online in play out with this infodemic and the spread of misinformation. And Charles Seif wrote a book called Virtual Unreality. And in the introduction to the book, he makes the comparison between the epidemiological parallels between the way physical viruses travel and the way information travels. And there are 3 main factors that drive an epidemic or a pandemic: how transmissible a given virus is, how persistent it is, so how long, for example, it could live on surfaces, which we've all read and thought and worried so much about, and then how connected people are, how close together they are. And the same is true, I think, of information, and he makes this case in the introduction. So we live in a time when we can transmit information from one person to many thousands, potentially, hundreds of thousands at the click of a button. It's incredibly easy. That information is very persistent. Everything on the internet is potentially forever. And we are, more connected than ever before. Most of us are active on multiple platforms with multiple followings and different audiences. So you can imagine if our virtual world were our physical world, how much more widespread the novel coronavirus would be. That's kind of what we're dealing with on the information front. That sort of draws it into focus. So the parallels here between the pandemic and the infodemic, a pandemic thrives on unsuspecting people who aren't taking precautions. 20 seconds, as we've learned, goes a long way. Wash your hands. Social distancing can help stop the spread, flatten the curve, and that's important because your choices affect others. So even if you don't catch the virus, you could transmit it. And even if you don't get sick, you could still spread it to others. And it has the potential to overwhelm our medical infrastructure. We saw that in Italy. We worked very hard not to have that happen again here in New York, especially. The parallels to the infodemic then also thrives on unsuspecting people. So if a piece of misinformation plays into your biases, if your guard is down, if you have a strong emotional reaction, you are vulnerable to falling for it and even spreading it. 20 seconds of checking goes a long way, as I hope to make the case for that. Just taking a moment to check the comments, do some lateral searching, check for a fact check goes a really long way. And if we can stop misinformation or flag it for others, respond in a comment with a fact check, we can practice our infodemic version of social distancing to stop the spread and flatten the curve of the spread of what is really potentially dangerous or even life-threatening viral rumors. And it is overwhelming our information infrastructure. So fact checkers right now are completely overwhelmed. But one difference is that there is no vaccine available yet for COVID-19, but there is a vaccine available for misinformation, and that's to learn to be more news literate and to be more savvy when it comes to digital verification and fact checking. So that's what we're going to dig into. Here's that announcement from Snopes, by the way, on March 20th that said that they are overwhelmed. It's overwhelming their small team of fact checkers. There was too much misinformation circulating for them to get to. And I think that makes the case about for why we all have to sort of step up and be more savvy and play a role to help clean up the information landscape. The fact checkers can't all do it on their own, but we can use some of the same skills and tools that they can here. So before I pivot, I don't know if there's been a question come up that we want to take, Sunshine, or if you want me to move on. I thought I would pause here as we pivot into this next section.
Sure. Thanks for checking, Peter. There are a couple of questions that I'd like to touch base with you about. The first one goes back to that screenshot that you shared regarding the purported statement from Trump on social media, the hundreds of governors thing. And so someone says, what tool did you use, Peter, to capture and trace the multiple posts that get the copy paste effect across multiple accounts?
So I just searched for the phrase, the original viral phrase on Twitter, and got hundreds of results. So I just screenshotted some of those and put them into a compilation. Great.
And I think that you're going to get into this, but I'm going to test the waters with this question. What should we do when we see doctored images like these on social media? Do we reply with factual information, such as that video is not from London, it's from Malaysia? This opens us up to all kinds of online harassment. So what other solutions are there other than reporting to the platform on which we see it?
It does. I think so. First, that's a very good point. If you're comfortable responding, I think it's important to do that. Clearly, reporting content is a great first step. If you're comfortable replying, that's also great. Tagging in fact checkers or forwarding it to Snopes forwarding it to the folks who cover the disinformation environment. There are other fact checkers, Lead Stories, factcheck.org, PolitiFact. They all kind of have open DMs and open messages, and you can email them examples. So that's also a really good idea. And then if you have an anonymous account, if you want to get into this, but you don't want your personal account engaging with purveyors of misinformation and people spreading chaos online and potentially get trolled, you could use a separate account to do your responding if you feel strongly enough, but also don't want to engage with your personal account.
Great. Okay, I think we can move on at this point. Thanks.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move through 5 skills to, as we said in the title, kind of help you fact check like a pro. So this is a lot of what professional fact checkers do at a very basic level. So this is just an introduction, but you'll see how powerful these 5 things can be in combination with each other. So first, I'm going to draw on the examples that I just went through. This example of the fake Trump quote. If we do some lateral reading, we just can search the phrase, Trump said, and the beginning of this quote to try to get to our answer. So the fastest route here, if you're on a computer using a browser, is to hit Control-T and do a quick search, or just open your Google app if you're on your phone, do a quick search, and you can see right away we have Reuters, PolitiFact, Snopes articles right up top that will help us understand what we're looking at. Google even pulls in, PolitiFact's rating here, false, in the actual results. Clicking through will help you understand why it's false, and PolitiFact will show its work and be transparent about how they know, but at least you have that initial rating there right in front of you. So it's literally 5 or 6 seconds away in the time it takes to type the beginning of the quote. You can have an answer. So lateral reading is actually something we really need to reinforce with teens. So as you all probably know, the News Literacy Project works mostly with middle school and high school students, and so it's a major goal of ours to make lateral reading, opening a new tab, doing a quick search, a habit of mind for them. I mean, there is maybe no more powerful first step you can take after you sort of pause, gauge your emotions, don't knee-jerk share, then do a quick search. So there are some related skills here. Click restraint. So, if you do this search, then look at the results and scan for credible sources, fact-checking organizations, standards-based news organizations. The top result may not always be your best one. Look for standards-based sources, not user-generated sources. Lateral reading can also help us go upstream to the source of information. We'll talk more about that, seeking a source that can give you more information, like a caption under a photo and so on. And then I've already mentioned, Control-T being just a really useful time saver if you're on a desktop or a laptop. So I'll pause there. If there are any lateral reading questions, that was a very, very basic, rundown of why lateral reading is important. But I know there are a lot of folks on the line who work with students and academic librarians. I see a question about that. So I know you've probably engaged these questions as well. So if anyone has a question or something to share there.
So someone asked about a list of lateral reading sources, a go-to list. Is this something that NLP has on your website?
No, we don't have on our website. I guess, when it comes to viral rumors, if you mean, websites to check if something's been debunked, the fact-checking organizations that I mentioned at the top, Snopes, obviously, PolitiFact, factcheck.org. There's a great fact checker, leadstories.org. AFP Fact Check, Agence France Presse, has a wonderful, more globally focused fact-checking organization. Full Fact is a more European-focused fact-checking organization as well.
Great. Someone also asked about a clarification on standards-based news sources versus user-generated.
Sure.
Can you clarify that?
Sure. So, a standards-based source of news would be from a news outlet that aspires to some kind of journalistic standards. Generally speaking, most institutional media aspire to a common set of standards around fairness and have verification baked into their process, and they're accountable for mistakes, so they correct mistakes and note that, which is very different than, say, a blog that's authored anonymously. So just helping students understand the difference between a standards-based source of information, something that has been either peer-reviewed or subjected to a verification editing process, as opposed to something that has just been posted directly to the web, either by someone who does put their name on it or anonymously.
Okay, great. So one of the questions was asking for an example for teens of a user-generated source. So like a blog would be a good example.
Yeah, or almost, a lot of what you see on social media would be user-generated, right? So many of the claims that I just went through are pieces of user-generated content. In fact, almost all of them are. Shared by someone we don't know on YouTube, shared to TikTok, shared to Reddit, to Instagram, to Twitter, and then they circulate from there.
Great. And one other question here that is a tricky one. Lateral reading and verifying information with sources like Snopes, fact check, etc., is great for those who trust those sources. Right. What do you suggest for those who believe that those very sources are part of the problem?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. What I generally recommend is, first of all, if Snopes tends to get more of that than other fact-checking organizations. I think they've been around longer. They've become a partisan target. Is to, use a different fact-checking organization that doesn't sort of trigger that response if you're working with a particular student or group of students. But you can also dig into the fact check itself. So when Snopes or PolitiFact or any other fact-checking organization publishes a fact check and debunks a viral rumor, they don't just say that photo is fake, trust us. They actually show you how they know why it's false. And so that's where the richness lies. Even if you read the Snopes piece or read the PolitiFact piece and then take the links that they use to prove something is false and just share those instead of the original fact check. So you can just share a link to the Getty image saying that picture is false instead of the Snopes or the PolitiFact entry showing that protester photo is false, for example.
Great, that's a great example, thanks. And then one last question for you before we go on to skill 2. Several people asked for a little bit more context around click restraint. And one person summed this up very nicely. They wrote, I liked the way Peter described what click restraint means behaviorally, as in don't do knee-jerk sharing. But can we hear a little bit more about how to communicate what restraint is and how people can practice it, maybe noticing emotional reactions, etc.?
Yes, so I guess there's sort of two aspects of click restraint. The context in which I mentioned it with lateral reading was exercising click restraint in search results. And I think a great exercise if you're working with young people or students that you're trying to engage around news and information literacy would be to just do some Google searches on your own and take screenshots of the results and ask students, where the credible results are. And if you do a strategic search that gives you a blend of kind of user-generated, dubious sources, obscure sources with some more credible sources, especially if those credible sources come further down, that can be a good exercise just on a slide. That's a great bell ringer if you're a middle school, high school teacher. That's a great icebreaker opener if you're in a lecture hall even. So that's one form of click restraint. The other, what you're talking about, is not sharing recklessly or in a knee-jerk fashion, as I put it. I think a great starting point for that, honestly, is to help them understand the business model of social media platforms and so-called ad tech. So, Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram all want you to stay on platform. That's how they make their money. And if you engage with content and leave their site, then you've left, right? YouTube, same way. And so That's how, you know, you get caught by the YouTube algorithm late at night when you're supposed to be doing something else, and it keeps suggesting videos, and the next thing you know, an hour has gone by and you've been served how many more ads than you would have had you just come to the site and done what you intended to do. So I would start there, helping them understand, here's the business model. They're monetizing your attention. They've built algorithms to keep you there and to keep serving you content that you like, that will keep you there so they can serve you more ads. But it's free, so that's the trade-off, but they should know that, right? And then that helps them also think about the architecture of those sites. So Twitter, Facebook, they want people to engage, and part of engaging is sharing. So they want you to share, and they want to make it as easy and quick as possible in their user interface. They don't say, are you sure? Like if you click share on Twitter, you don't get a modal that says, hey, are you sure you really want to share this with your X number of followers? That might be a great thing for the information environment, not a great thing for Twitter's bottom line. So helping them understand that those are purposefully designed to be frictionless, to be easy to do for a business, you know, to serve the business model of those platforms is a great way, I think, to introduce the notion of click restraint when it comes to sharing.
Great. Thank you, Peter.